Today I'm launching a new series on this channel called What's Appening. Get it? Because happening, and we talk about apps here, so Appening. I know, I'm very clever. But this show is a routine series where I'm going to be talking about the business side of the mobile app space. We're not going to be diving into technical topics. There's a phenomenal show from Sean Allen called Swift News where he covers all of that. And what I really want to use these episodes for is to cover the business side of the mobile app space. So what do I mean by that? As developers, we build things. We generally want to commercialize. We want to make some money off of the things we build. And we also want to stay up to speed on the various trends and things that are changing in the land of apps. So without further ado, if you're into this video and excited for this series, drop a like down below before we get started, and let's start talking about this week's stories. All right, first up, we're going to be talking about the fact that social commerce is to triple to 1.2 trillion with a T by 2025. So let's set some context. For those of you who aren't aware, a lot of mobile apps have a lot of audience social awareness involved. So things like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, where people, before they go and make a purchase in the real world or on Amazon, what have you, will go to a particular app and they'll say, hey, like, what influencers are buying this thing? Or what do the reviews look like? Or are there videos of this thing? Even here on YouTube, if you think about it. And social commerce is an area of high growth for a lot of the large players in the space, the Googles, the Facebooks, even the Apples of the world. You might have noticed in the App Store search ads, a lot of these things have a component of social commerce. And the fact that it's growing to 1.2 trillion, which is a ridiculous number to even begin with, should tell you that commerce and social checkout type applications, or anything relating to that space, maybe you're working on a retail type application, you probably want to be somewhat knowledgeable and integrate a social component. Now, I don't particularly work on checkout type applications or, storefronts or e-commerce. This is a topic that I get asked about a lot in terms of making like a series on it. Maybe, fingers crossed, we'll see how that ends up going, but definitely a very interesting thing to keep your eye on. Alright, the second story is the fact that mobile app spend has jumped 23% and user app sessions have gotten longer. Now, this isn't all that of a surprise. 2021, we had the pandemic, we had the lockdown, people are more glued to their phones than ever before. People are using apps more and more, whether it's, for just social consumption, playing, mini games that are pretty simple in nature, but pretty darn addictive. Talking with people on various messaging apps, collaborating, productivity tools, binging TikTok videos, guilty as charged, the likes, right? Like there's an endless list. Now, the interesting aspect of this story is the fact that spending is up 23%. That number might not sound like a lot, but if you take a look at the actual figures from app spend, the billions of dollars, 23% growth in terms of an annualized basis is astronomical. Now, this spend is broken down in in-app purchases, various other subscription type models. This should be a no-brainer and a huge signal that commercializing through your mobile app via the Apple App Store, or even in this case, the general App Store around the world, so things like Android Play, the likes, doesn't have to be Apple App Store, is a no-brainer. And next up, we have the fact that Apple has paid $260 billion to app developers to date. This is crazy. I remember making my absolute first app, and if you needed any justification that there is, profit to be made building mobile apps, 260 billion reasons for you right now. Now, the one thing that I've noticed, and I'll share that's highlighted in the story as well, is there are more and more players that are taking more and more, larger slices of this pie. That said, there's not a single company that's dominating 50% of this. There are millions of developers, and while everyone might not be earning, 7 figures, 8 figures in the millions, there are definitely millions and hundreds of thousands, I would fare to argue, that are earning a livable wage and or a nice passive income on the side. So $260 billion is absolutely incomprehensible. I remember my very first dinky little apps. One day I'll share them here on this channel. I still have them. It's like 10 lines of code. Somehow the standards of the App Store back then weren't so high and they were approved. That I'll leave for a different video, but 260 billion reasons to get moving on your building app journeys. Next up, we've got the fact that Instagram is testing out private story likes. Of course, Instagram is one of the most popular apps of all time, so naturally there's going to be a story about them whenever they're betaing any features. In this case, private story likes. Now, the feature itself is pretty self-explanatory. The creator or owner of a piece of content, a story in this case, can see, who's liking it privately versus publicly, folks viewing it. This article also goes into the fact that you can, there's another feature that they are beta testing where you can actually reply to an existing comment on a story. So imagine someone posts a story, you commented on it, and it was public in some regard. Someone else can reply to it as well. And I think the big push here is the fact that brands and businesses want to use this to engage with their followers and customers and folks that are using, their products. It could also be influencers. My hot take is the fact that this is something that TikTok enables creators and businesses to do. Big catch up being played here by Facebook, aka owner of Instagram. So pretty interesting story. And next up, we have a pretty clickbaity headline here that Apple's app transparency tracking fails to stop third parties from tracking. The fact of the matter is, it's kind of true. While people being developers have to actually ask for consent to track folks now, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and anyone basically involved in advertising can still track people based on things like IP address, their location, their behavior, their connections, their contacts, even though that, ATT app tracking transparency is a step in the right direction, in my opinion. And labels in the App Store for privacy and what data is collected is definitely adding more visibility into what's going on. There are, these companies that are multi-trillion-dollar companies whose entire businesses are hinged on the fact that they can connect these digital profiles to their users. So, ATT, I think it made an attempt. I think in certain areas, Europe comes to mind with GDPR. There are more stringent regulation around tracking and saving data, but in the large majority of cases, I think Apple will need to extend this principle or somehow consider a way to tighten tracking more so, because this was a big deal up until it came out, and we saw some figures drop from some companies that are very ad spend reliant, but a lot of things have rebounded, and this title really says it all. App tracking transparency kind of failed to do the big grandiose vision that was presented at WWDC 2-3 years ago. I remember the actual presentation and the slide, and people were pretty, on one side people were pretty excited, right? This was a great thing, and on one side there were people that were absolutely livid because it hurts a lot of business models for pretty large companies. And granted, it's debatable if it's if there's not an alternative or not, but I digress. Pretty interesting story, definitely food for thought. And finally, the last story for today: TikTok consumer spend up more than 70%. Okay, so TikTok is obviously one of the most popular, if not the most popular apps right now in the world, and it's pretty interesting and it's pretty evident that spend is up 70%. So this story goes into the fact that I believe it's something like $800 and some million have been spent by users in TikTok, which is absolutely astronomical. And there's a few key takeaways here. One, people are spending a ton of money, not surprising. But two, people really like connecting with creators. So in this case, the medium, of course, is video. But if you ever are considering making an app and having a component that's social in there, if it makes sense, this is a good indicator that you can actually build a model where people want to spend money. They don't need to be haggled. They don't need to be bombarded with, upgrade, upsells, different views and screens popping up to, start a free trial or whatever you might end up doing. But the consumer drive and spend is definitely there. TikTok in this case is a particular candidate and the culprit that we're analyzing per the story because it's just so darn popular, and 77% is literally ludicrous, the fact that it's growing this much. And I believe this is the last story that I've got. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this first segment of What's Appening. We'll see if that name actually sticks. I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm going to try to do my best to organize some of these stories as I come across them. I haven't decided yet if this is going to be a monthly show, a weekly show, a when I have time and feel like it show. We shall see. Let me know in the comments down below if this is a topic that you guys are interested in. I know it's something that I really am interested in, which is why I wanted to see, how many of you guys actually care too. Drop a like down below, if not for the video, definitely for my my effort in trying to make this organized. Subscribe if you're into tech, iOS, coding, and at this point, the business side of tech and software. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.